Hey guys, it's Lord of the Pogs. Tomorrow is October, and that means horror movies. I love horror movies, and October is my month to watch horror movies back to back, and I don't need to explain myself to anybody. So today, I want to share with you 31 of my favorite horror movies from my personal collection. I've listed them in order of release, and I'll be talking about the backstory if there is one, the real events that inspired the movie or where the story came from, sequels, series, or franchise if any developed, as well as remakes and reboots. 1968's Night of the Living Dead. Night of the Living Dead was an independent horror film directed by George Romero that follows 7 people who are trapped in a rural farmhouse in western Pennsylvania which is under assault by an enlarging group of flesh-eating undead ghouls. The word zombie is never used in Night of the Living Dead. The phrase used is flesh-eating undead ghouls. The film spawned 6 sequels: Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, Land of the Dead, Diary of the Dead, Survival of the Dead, and Twilight of the Dead, which is currently in development. In 1990, director George Romero wrote a remake of his original 1968 film, directed by Tom Savini. 1968's Night of the Living Dead was my first horror movie. I was 6 years old, and it terrified me. I didn't start really getting into horror movies until I was a teenager, but as an adult, I still draw my fascination with the genre back to Night of the Living Dead. 1973's The Exorcist. The Exorcist was written for the screen by William Peter Blatty, based on his 1971 novel of the same name. It follows the demonic possession of a young girl and her mother's attempt to rescue her through an exorcism conducted by a pair of Catholic priests. It was inspired by a 1949 case of demonic possession and exorcism that Blatty heard about while he was a student in the class of 1950 at Georgetown University. The Exorcist spawned 4 sequels: The Exorcist II: The Heretic, The Exorcist III, The Exorcist: The Beginning, and Dominion, prequel to The Exorcist, with an untitled trilogy currently in development. I watched The Exorcist the first time when I was a teenager. I think I was about 14, and I loved it so much. That's what really sparked my fascination with horror as a genre as a young adult. 1976's The Omen. The Omen follows Damien Thorne, a young child replaced at birth by his father, unbeknownst to his wife, after the biological child dies shortly after birth. As a series of mysterious events and violent deaths occur around the family and Damien enters childhood, they come to learn that he is, in fact, the prophesied Antichrist. The idea of a movie about the Antichrist came after a discussion about the Bible between producer Harvey Bernhard and screenwriter David Seltzer. The film spawned 3 sequels: Damien, The Omen 2, The Omen 3, The Final Conflict, and The Omen 4, The Awakening. A remake was released in 2006, which was also written by David Seltzer, and in 2016, an Omen prequel was announced to be in the works. I heard about The Omen the first time from an episode of That 70s Show, which I used to watch as a teenager. I really enjoyed the simplicity of the story, and the Omen franchise is actually a really well-done film series. 1976's Carrie. It revolves around Carrie White, a friendless, bullied high school girl from an abusive religious household who uses her newly discovered telekinetic powers to exact revenge on those who torment her. In the process, she causes one of the worst local disasters the town has ever had. Adapted from Stephen King's 1974 novel of the same name, Carrie was one of the most frequently banned books in the United States in the 90s because of its violence, cursing, underage sex, and negative view of religion. It is the first of more than 100 film and television productions adapted from or based on the published works of Stephen King. A sequel, The Rage, Carrie 2, was released in 1999, along with a 2002 TV film and a 2013 remake. 1978's Halloween. The plot centers on a mental patient, Michael Myers, who is committed to a sanitarium for murdering his babysitting teenage sister on Halloween night when he was 6 years old. 15 years later, he escapes and returns to his hometown where he stalks a female babysitter and her friends while under pursuit by his psychiatrist. It spawned a sequel in 1981 and a franchise of 13 films, largely kicked off by Halloween 4: The Return of Michael Myers in 1988. In 2018, a direct sequel, ignoring Halloween 2 and all subsequent Halloween films, also titled Halloween, was released, followed by Halloween Kills in 2021 and Halloween Ends, which comes out in a few weeks. In 2007, Rob Zombie released a remake of the original Halloween film, which was followed by a direct sequel in 2009. Rob Zombie's 2007 remake has kind of a cult following, and I know a lot of people who prefer the remake, but it just didn't vibe with me the same way as the original. 1979's The Amityville Horror. The Amityville Horror is based on Jay Anson's 1977 book of the same name, which itself is based on the claims of the paranormal experiences by the Lutz family. On November 13, 1974, Ronald DeFeo Jr. shot and killed 6 members of his family at 112 Ocean Avenue, a large Dutch colonial house situated in a suburban neighborhood in Amityville on the south shore of Long Island, New York. He was convicted of second-degree murder in November 1975 and sentenced to 6 terms of 25 years to life in prison. In December 1975, George and Kathy Lutz and their 3 children moved into the house. After 28 days, the Lutzes fled the house, claiming to have been terrorized by paranormal phenomena while living there. Ronald DeFeo Jr. died in custody in March 2021. It spawned a sequel in 1982, Amityville 2: The Possession, which is a loose prequel also set at 112 Ocean Avenue, and featuring the fictional Montelli family loosely based on the DeFeo family. Amityville 3D was released in 1983, and although it does make reference to the original Amityville Horror story, it was not promoted as a sequel. It's loosely based on Stephen Kaplan, who at the time was trying to prove the Lutz's story was a hoax. The original 1979 film spawned a franchise of 11 films and a remake which was released in 2005. I saw the Amityville Horror for the first time when I was 15. 1982's Poltergeist. Poltergeist focuses on a suburban family whose home is invaded by malevolent ghosts that abduct their daughter. Steven Spielberg conceived Poltergeist as a horror sequel to his 1977 film Close Encounters of the Third Kind, titled Night Skies. However, director Tobe Hooper was less interested in the sci-fi elements and suggested they collaborate on a ghost story. The film spawned 2 sequels, Poltergeist 2: The Other Side, and Poltergeist 3, and there is a remake currently in production. 1987's Hellraiser. Hellraiser involves a mystical puzzle box which summons the Cenobites, a group of extra-dimensional, sadomasochistic beings who cannot differentiate between pain and pleasure. It was based on Clive Barker's 1986 novella The Hellbound Heart. Barker worked as a hustler in the 1970s, and his experiences made him want to tell a story about good and evil in which sexuality was the connective tissue. The look of the Cenobites was inspired by an underground club called Cell Block 28 in New York where people were getting pierced for fun. When he directed and wrote the film adaptation, Barker considered naming the film Sadomasochists from Hell. The film spawned 9 sequels: Hellbound Hellraiser 2, Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth, Hellraiser Bloodline, Hellraiser Inferno, Hellraiser Hellseeker, Hellraiser Deader, Hellraiser Hellworld, Hellraiser Revelations, and Hellraiser Judgment. A reboot of the franchise, also titled Hellraiser, is being released next week. The first time I watched Hellraiser, I didn't like it. I thought it was too weird. Then I read the book, and after watching the film, after reading the book, I loved it. 1990's It. It is a 2-part miniseries adapted from Stephen King's 1986 novel of the same name. It revolves around a predatory monster that can transform itself into its prey's worst fears, allowing it to exploit the phobias of its victims. It mostly takes the humanoid form of Pennywise, a darkly comedic clown. The protagonists are the Lucky Seven, or the Losers Club, a group of outcast kids who discover Pennywise and vow to kill him by any means necessary. The series takes place over 2 different time periods, the first when the losers first confront Pennywise as children in 1960, and the second when they return as adults in 1990 to defeat him a second time after he resurfaces. A remake, titled It Chapter 1, was released in 2017, followed by a sequel, It Chapter 2, released in 2019. 1992's Candyman. Candyman is based on Clive Barker's short story The Forbidden, and follows a Chicago graduate student completing a thesis on urban legends and folklore, which leads her to the legend of the Candyman, the ghost of an African-American artist and the son of a slave who was murdered in the late 19th century for his relationship with the daughter of a wealthy white man. It spawned two sequels, Candyman Farewell to the Flesh and Candyman Day of the Dead, and a direct sequel was released in 2021. 1996's Scream. Scream follows high school student Cindy Prescott and her group of friends in the fictional town of Woodsboro, California, who become the targets of a mysterious killer in a Halloween costume known as Ghostface. The film satirizes the cliches of the slasher genre popularized in films such as Halloween, Friday the 13th, and Nightmare on Elm Street. Scream spawned three sequels, Scream 2, Scream 3, and Scream 4, and the fifth film, also titled Scream, was released in 2022. Although it was billed as a reboot, it's a direct sequel to 2011's Scream 4. 1997's Wishmaster. Wishmaster concerns a djinn, an evil genie who is released from a jewel and seeks to capture the soul of the woman who discovered him, thereby opening a portal and freeing his fellow jinn to inhabit and enslave the earth. The film was followed by three sequels, Wishmaster 2, Evil Never Dies, Wishmaster 3, Beyond the Gates of Hell, and Wishmaster, The Prophecy Fulfilled. The first and second movies are considered to be in the horror genre, while the third and fourth movies have less horror elements and are more associated with action and romance. 1999's The Blair Witch Project. Directors Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez conceived of a fictional legend of the Blair Witch in 1993 and developed a 35-page screenplay with the dialogue to be improvised. Its promotional marketing campaign listed the actors as either missing or deceased, and it was the first widely released film marketed primarily by the internet. The film's official website launched in June 1998, featuring fake police reports and fielding questions about the missing students. These augmented the film's found footage device to spark debates across the internet over whether the film was real-life documentary or a work of fiction. The filmmakers made advertising efforts to promulgate the events in the film as factual, including the distribution of flyers asking viewers to come forward with any information. The campaign tactic was that viewers were being told that the characters were missing while researching in the woods for the mythical Blair Witch. The IMDb page also listed the actors as missing, presumed dead, in the first year of the film's availability. The film's website contains materials of actors posing as police and investigators giving testimony about their casework and shared childhood photos of the actors to add a sense of realism. The Blair Witch Project was the first film to go viral despite having been produced before many of the technologies that facilitate such phenomena existed. I remember when the Blair Witch Project came out. My friends and I all thought it was real. I even found a missing poster in my hometown in Idaho. There was a hotline that you could call. I never called it, but I knew a few people that did, that would take you to a voicemail that apparently said, "You've reached the Burkittsville Police Department. If you have any information on these missing students, please leave it here." The film spawned two sequels, Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2, and the third film, Blair Witch, ignored the events of the second film. There is also a fourth installment currently in production. 2002's Ju-On the Grudge. Ju-On the Grudge is the third installment in the Ju-On series, following the short films Katasumi and 10 Fours. The series focuses on those affected by a curse created in a house by a deceased family's rage that destroys the lives of everyone who comes in contact with it. Known as the Ju-On, this curse causes its victims to become fatally afflicted with it, which in turn leads to a new curse being born and passed like a virus to all those who enter the family residence or come into contact with the curse in any way. Ju-On the Grudge spawned an American remake, tagged The Grudge, followed by two sequels, The Grudge 2 and The Grudge 3. In 2020, a reboot of Ju-On the Grudge was released as a prequel. 2002's Ghost Ship. Ghost Ship follows a marine salvage crew in the Bering Sea who discover a mysterious ocean liner that disappeared in 1962. I've always wondered if Ghost Ship was inspired by the case of the Mary Celeste, an American ship discovered adrift and deserted off the coast of the Azores in 1872, but I've never been able to verify that. 2004's Saw. Saw tells a narrative revolving around the mystery of the Jigsaw Killer, who tests his victims' will to live by putting them through deadly games where they must inflict great physical pain upon themselves to survive. Saw follows Jigsaw's latest victims, who awaken in a large, dilapidated bathroom, with one being ordered to kill the other to save his own family. Inspired by the Blair Witch Project and Darren Aronofsky's Pi, the original idea was two men chained to opposite sides of a bathroom with a dead body in the middle of the floor, and they are trying to figure out why and how they are there. By the end of the film, they realize the person lying on the floor is not dead, and he is the reason they are locked in the room. The film spawned 8 sequels: Saw 2, Saw 3, Saw 4, Saw 5, Saw 6, Saw 3D, Jigsaw, and Spiral, with Saw X or Saw 10 currently in production. 2005's The Exorcism of Emily Rose. The Exorcism of Emily Rose is loosely based on the story of Anneliese Michael and follows a self-proclaimed agnostic who acts as a defense counsel representing a parish priest accused by the state of negligent homicide after he performs an exorcism. Anneliese Michael was a German woman who underwent 67 Catholic exorcism rites during the year before her death and died of malnutrition, for which her parents and priests were convicted of negligent homicide. German director Hans Christian Schmidt made his own film of Michael's story, Requiem, in 2006. 2008's The Strangers. The Strangers follows Kristen and James, whose stay at a vacation home is disrupted by 3 masked criminals who infiltrate the home. It was inspired by 2 real-life events: the multiple homicide Manson family Tate murders and a series of break-ins that occurred in director Brian Bertino's neighborhood as a child. Some people have noted similarities to the Ketty Cabin murders that occurred in Ketty, California in 1981. The Ketty Cabin murders took place in house number 28 of the Ketty Resort. The bodies of Susan Sharp, John Stephen Sharp, were found on the morning of April 12th by Sue's 14-year-old daughter Shyla, who had been sleeping at a friend's house. Sue's 2 younger sons, Rick and Greg, as well as their friend Justin Smart, were also in the house but were unharmed. The film spawned a sequel, The Strangers Pray at Night, with an untitled sequel trilogy currently in production. 2012's Sinister. Sinister stars Ethan Hawke as a struggling true crime writer whose discovery of videos depicting grisly murders in his new house puts his family in danger. It was inspired by a nightmare writer Robert Cargill had after watching the 2002 film The Ring, and spawned a sequel in 2015, Sinister 2. 2013's The Conjuring. The Conjuring centers on the alleged real-life exploits of Ed and Lorraine Warren, a married couple who investigated paranormal events. Their real-life reports inspired the Amityville Horror story and film franchise. In The Conjuring, the Warrens come to the assistance of the Perron family, who experienced increasingly disturbing events in their farmhouse in Rhode Island in 1971. The Conjuring spawned a sequel, The Conjuring 2, in 2016, with a spin-off, The Crooked Man, currently in production, and a third film, The Devil Made Me Do It, released in 2021. Along with the Conjuring trilogy, the Conjuring franchise also involves 3 Annabelle films: Annabelle, Annabelle Creation, and Annabelle Comes Home, The Nun and The Nun 2, as well as a standalone film, The Curse of La Llorona. The Conjuring 2 follows the Warrens as they travel to England to assist the Hodgson family, who were experiencing poltergeist activity at their Enfield Council House in 1977, which later became referred to as the Enfield Poltergeist. The Annabelle trilogy was inspired by the story of a doll named Annabelle, told by Ed and Lorraine Warren. And The Curse of La Llorona is based on the Latin American folklore of La Llorona, Hispanic-American mythical vengeful ghost who is said to roam waterfront areas mourning her children who she drowned. La Llorona follows a mother in 1973 Los Angeles who must save her children from a malevolent spirit trying to steal them. I just finished reading The Demonologist, which is a book about Ed and Lorraine Warren's work, and it references many of the events told in the Conjuring movies. 2013's Oculus. Oculus is about a young woman who is convinced that an antique mirror is responsible for the death and misfortune that her family suffered. It's based on director Mike Flanagan's short film Oculus, Chapter 3, The Man with the Plan, which had only one setting, a single actor, and a mirror. 2014's The Babadook. The Babadook is based on director Jennifer Kent's 2005 short film Monster, which follows a single mother who must confront her son's fear of a monster in their home. 2014's It Follows. It Follows is about a young woman who is pursued by a supernatural entity after a sexual encounter and must have sex with another individual to avoid it. Director David Robert Mitchell conceived the film based on recurring dreams he had in his youth about being followed. The role that sexual transmission plays came later from his desire for something that could transfer between people. The film's distributor, the Weinstein Company, is currently looking into the possibility of a sequel. 2015's We Are Still Here. We Are Still Here is about grieving parents who find themselves the focus of an attack by vengeful spirits. Director Ted Gogigan began work on the film as a tribute to the 1981 Italian horror film The House by the Cemetery, about a series of murders taking place in a New England home. 2016's Train to Busan. Train to Busan is a South Korean horror film which takes place on a high-speed train from Seoul to Busan as a zombie apocalypse suddenly breaks out in the country and threatens the safety of the passengers. An animated prequel, Seoul Station, was released later in 2016, and a standalone sequel, Peninsula, set 4 years after the events of Train to Busan, was released in 2020. 2017's Get Out. Get Out follows a young black man who uncovers shocking secrets when he meets the family of his white girlfriend. 2017's Veronica. Veronica is a Spanish film loosely based on the true events from the 1991 Vallecas case, where Estefania Gutierrez Lazaro died mysteriously after using a Ouija board. In March 2022, Netflix announced the development of a prequel titled Sister Death. 2018's A Quiet Place. A Quiet Place revolves around a father and a mother who struggle to survive and rear their children in a post-apocalyptic world inhabited by blind monsters with an acute sense of hearing. Screenwriters Scott Beck and Brian Woods grew up together in Iowa and watched numerous silent films. They used their experience growing up close to a farmland as the setting, including a grain silo as the place considered dangerous in their upbringing. After considering developing the film as a potential fourth installment in the Cloverfield franchise, director John Krasinski decided that it would work better as a standalone film capable of forming an independent franchise. A sequel titled A Quiet Place Part 2 was released in 2020. 2019's Parasite. Parasite is another South Korean film that follows a poor family who scheme to become employed by a wealthy family and infiltrate their household by posing as unrelated, highly qualified individuals. While working on Snowpiercer, a 2013 post-apocalyptic science fiction action film based on the French climate fiction graphic novel Les Transpersonnage by Jacques Loeb, director Bong Joon-ho was encouraged by a theater actor friend to write a play. He had been a tutor for the son of a wealthy family in Seoul in his early 20s and considered turning his experience into a stage production. The source material from that play was the basis for the film. 2020's The Invisible Man. The Invisible Man is about a woman who believes she is being stalked and gaslighted by her seemingly deceased ex-boyfriend after he acquires the ability to become invisible. It was inspired by H.G. Wells's novel of the same name, which itself spawned a 1933 film. There is an untitled sequel, as well as a spin-off titled The Invisible Woman, both currently in development. 2022's Smile. After witnessing a bizarre traumatic incident involving a patient, a doctor starts experiencing frightening occurrences that she can't explain. As an overwhelming terror begins taking over her life, the doctor must confront her scarred past in order to survive and escape her horrifying new reality. Smile is an adaptation of director Parker Finn's own short film, Laura Hasn't Slept, which saw a young woman seeking the help of her therapist, desperate to rid herself of a recurring nightmare. It's scheduled to be released today. Thanks for watching. Please mention some of your favorite horror movies in the comments and I'll let you know if I've seen it or not. If you enjoyed this video, please consider dropping a tip. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit that little bell in the corner to get notifications on more videos like this one.